The trial of Alex Murdaugh is already bringing some memorable moments. We'll go through 5 key points from week 1. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
The male victim laying on the ground to my left, as well as the female victim on the ground to my right. The male victim was close to a small shed in the dog kennel on the left. There was a large deal of blood that had pooled around his body. Same thing for the female victim on the right. Also a large amount of blood around her body.
As you approached and at first saw the male victim and the female victim, what was your assessment? Was there any possible signs of life from your...
My initial assessment was that there was not. There appeared to be a large amount of blood around each of them, as well as brain matter.
Did you ultimately have a conversation with Mr. Murdaugh when you were out there?
I did.
All right. And do you see him here in the courtroom today, the person that you talked to?
I do.
And can you point him out to the jury, please?
Yes, sir. He's right there, wearing a dark blue or black jacket.
Your Honor, can the record reflect that he's identified Mr. Murdaugh?
It does.
The trial of Alex Murdaugh is underway. The renowned South Carolina attorney is accused of murdering his wife Maggie and his son Paul. Now, prosecutors say that he shot them to death on June 7th, 2021 on their family property. And after week 1, there is a lot to talk about. So let's recap 5 key moments from week 1 in the Alex Murdaugh trial. And we'll start off with opening statements. Opening statements from the prosecution and the defense, both sides setting the stage for the jury on what to expect from the case. And we'll start off with Prosecutor Creighton Waters, who highlighted really especially important evidence for the jury to consider. But really, we have to talk about this curious cell phone video.
At 8:44 and 55 seconds, Paul recorded a video. He was down at the kennels because he had been talking to a friend of his, and you're going to hear from this friend because his friend's dog was in the kennels and they thought there was something wrong with the tail. And Paul was recording a video of it to send to his friend. 8:44 and 55 seconds. And on that video, and you'll see that video, and you'll hear from witnesses that identify Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, and Alex's voice. Told anyone who would listen he was never there. At 8:44 and 55 seconds, there's a video. The evidence will show that he was there. He was at the murder scene with the 2 victims. And more than that, just over 3 minutes later, 8:49 and 1 second, Paul's phone locks forever.
And he also talked about the significance of a piece of clothing.
You're also going to hear evidence that about a week after the murders, Mr. Alex Murdaugh's father had died, Mr. Randolph, and about a week after the murders, he shows up early in the morning at his parents' home, where his mother still is in late-stage Alzheimer's, on Alameda in Hampton. It's uncharacteristic for him to show up early, uncharacteristic for him to show up at all like that, and he comes in, and he's carrying something in a blue tarp, and he takes it upstairs. And eventually law enforcement finds out about that. And they go upstairs and they find a wadded up, very, very large raincoat in a blue color. Could look like a tarp. And you're going to hear evidence that it was coated with gunshot residue on the inside.
Now, defense attorney Dick Harpootlian said it makes absolutely no sense for Alex to murder his family, who he loved.
You're not going to hear a single witness say that their relationship, Maggie and Alex's relationship, were anything other than loving. You're going to hear about how they went to a baseball game the weekend before. You're going to hear about their relationship. You're going to see texts and emails indicating a loving relationship. Paul, the apple of his eye. You're going to see a video somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock the night of the murders, with Paul and Alec riding around looking at some trees they planted. It's a Snapchat that Paul sent to other people because the trees were not planted very well. They were cantilevering over. They're laughing. They're having a good time. That would be about an hour before the Attorney General says he swatted them. The gases from that shot literally exploded his head like a watermelon hit with a sledgehammer. All that was left was the front of his face. Everything else was gone. His brain exploded out of his head, hit the ceiling in the shed, and dropped to his feet. Horrendous, horrible, butchering. So, to find Alex Murdaugh guilty of murdering his son, you're going to have to accept that within an hour of having a extraordinarily bonding, you can see it in the Snapchat, that he executes him in a brutal fashion.
And also said, prosecution can't prove their case. There's a lack of forensic evidence.
You're going to hear their witnesses explain the catastrophic injuries to Paul, that his head literally exploded. And whoever shot him with that shotgun was probably no more than 3 feet away. Maybe closer, maybe a little further away. His head exploded. You would be covered in blood from head to foot. Head to foot. In blood. They seized his clothes that night. SLED did. And they well, first of all, you're going to see in the videos from the officers that arrived that night, there's no blood on him. They didn't find any blood on him. SLED's testing indicated 12 different places on his shirt and pants. No human blood detected. Period.
So now, opening statements, they're not evidence. The jury's really not supposed to consider them as evidence, but they are persuasive statements for the jury to think about. It's, again, previews of what to expect. And as I said after opening statements, sometimes I can tell which side has a stronger case, who might even win. Can't tell it here. We need to let the evidence decide for ourselves. And let's talk about the evidence. We're going to start right now with the 911 phone call. So 911 phone calls usually start off a case and an investigation. And here it was the call from Alex Murdaugh. It was the 911 call from the defendant himself. You see, Murdaugh was the one who alerted police to the fact that his wife and son were dead. His alibi is that he went to visit his mother, who had late-stage Alzheimer's, and when he came back to his property, he found his family by the dog kennels deceased. Now, let's listen to this 911 phone call because the defense and the prosecution are framing it in their own ways, right? The prosecution suggesting that he's faking his sadness and he's trying to cover up what he did. Defense saying this is a genuine expression of grief and shock. I'll leave it to you.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child got badly.
Okay, you said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Sir?
You said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Yes, sir. 4147 Moselle Road.
Stay on the line with me, okay? Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay?
Collin County Communications.
Collin, I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line, caller from 4147 Moselle Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and sir, give me the address again.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennels.
Okay, and did you see anyone? Okay, is he breathing at all?
No.
Is she? Okay, do you see anything? Do you see anyone in the area?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
What color's your house on the outside? What color is your house on the outside?
It's white. You can't see it from the road.
Okay, is it a house or a mobile home?
It's a house.
Okay, and what is your name?
My name is Alex Murdaugh.
I am not sure that 911 phone call, as important as it is going to make or break the case. I think it is more just a piece of the overall puzzle, but significant nonetheless. Something else to note, though, about that 911 phone call is that Murdaugh was instructed not to touch the bodies, but he said that he did so already because he was checking on them for a pulse. Now, there was been a back and forth on whether he did that, and also perhaps would explain any biological or DNA material on him or his clothes. I should tell you that pre-trial, we heard a back and forth about this from the defense and the prosecution. The prosecution saying that blood on Murdaugh would be from blood spatter, the close-range gunshots, the blowback from the blood of the bodies. Defense said no, that any blood on him was from touching the bodies, not being the shooter. I think the judge in this case has yet to rule on the admissibility of that evidence, so we're going to see which way it ultimately shakes up. Now, we would actually hear a lot more from Alex Murdaugh in this week one, and that brings me to another notable moment, the testimony of Sergeant Daniel Green, one of the first responders to the scene. Listen to him testifying about his initial observations.
As I approached toward him, I could see the male victim laying on the ground to my left, as well as the female victim on the ground to my right. The male victim was close to a small shed in the dog kennel on the left. There was a large deal of blood that had pooled around his body. Same thing for the female victim on the right. Also a large amount of blood around her body. His immediate reaction was to start telling me about an incident that had happened with his son with a boating accident.
With the boating accident?
Yes, sir.
Had you asked him anything about that?
I did not.
And then Sergeant Green's body cam was played as well.
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but
Okay.
I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
Okay.
I rode around with Paul for 2 hours this afternoon in the pickup truck.
That's your son, Paul? Okay.
Somebody going to check him?
Yes, sir. They've already checked him.
They did check him?
Yes, sir.
It's official that they're dead?
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
When you observed these victims, was it obvious that they had injuries incompatible with life?
Yes, any reasonable person that came upon those bodies would have come to a conclusion that they were deceased.
This is the firearm you brought from inside the house?
Sir, yes, sir. I went and this is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious.
Okay.
He's been getting punched. I know that's what it is.
Okay, what Murdaugh is referring to is how in 2019, a teenager named Mallory Beach died in an accident on the Murdaugh family boat. Paul was allegedly driving. He was allegedly engaging in underage drinking. A lawsuit was filed by Beach's family, and it ultimately, I should tell you, recently, the case has been settled. So did Alex Murdaugh grab a gun from the house because he was scared? Does he legitimately believe his son and wife were murdered over this incident? Or is he creating an elaborate story, an elaborate cover-up, immediately drawing suspicion away from himself? Look, I mean, it's an odd killing, 2 victims, 2 different weapons, these alternative scenarios. It's something to think about. And just focusing a little bit more on the people who responded to the scene, Jason Chapman, a major with the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, said that while Murdaugh didn't, shed any tears on the scene, he did look upset. He did say it was interesting that the emotion kind of changed when investigators started doing their work, when they started looking at the tire tracks, the impressions at the scene. He was quoted as saying, quote, "The breathing slowed and he began to watch us work more closely, sometimes out of the corner of his eye." So these initial impressions from investigators are always important. Now, another key moment that we have to focus on is the defense, because the defense had an opportunity to cross-examine prosecution witnesses, and we want to highlight right now how Dick Harpootlian cross-examined Sergeant Green.
Who's that standing inside the feed room?
Just inside that doorway was Deputy McDowell.
Okay. Were you the president? Oh, is that your body cam? So you're watching him do it, right?
That's correct.
Should he have done that?
Stand where he's standing.
Standing inside the feed room.
It's part of the crime scene. We're all standing inside of the crime scene.
Inside what?
the crime scene. We are all standing in the same crime scene.
I understand the same crime scene, but clearly you believe, based on discussion, and everyone in your unit believed, that the fatal shot was made where he's basically standing, correct? In that area.
Where we are all standing.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is that procedure to walk around on top of an area where shots have been fired? That perhaps, and I think even in this they're talking about tissue or brain matter laying there. I mean, aren't you supposed to? You don't put anything on your feet.
This shows you where the defense is going, that there were problems in the investigation and how the crime scene was processed, issues with evidence preservation. It is a common strategy, a common tactic in cases like this. And I'll tell you what, it can definitely hurt a prosecution's case for sure. So we know why they're highlighting it and focusing on it. All right, now let's move on to another big moment. And that is when jurors actually saw Alex Murdaugh in an interview on the night of the killings. It happened inside of a state agent's car. I think it lasted about 30 minutes. It took place hours after the shootings. In fact, Murdaugh's lawyer, Danny Henderson, was also in the car. I believe he was in the back seat. And you're going to see at one point that Alex Murdaugh becomes uncontrollable.
Just start at the top, take your time.
Like when I came back here, I mean, I pulled up and I could see him, and, you know, I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. My boy over there, I could see it was.
Sorry.
And I could see his brain on his... And I ran over to Maggie, and actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. You know, I tried to turn him over, and I don't know, I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to my wife, and I mean, I could see.
Did you touch Maggie at all?
I did. I touched them both.
Okay.
I tried to take, I tried to do it as limited as possible, but I tried to take their pulse on both of them. And, you know, I called 911 pretty much right away, and she was very good.
Now, it's interesting because the prosecution's theory is that Alex Murdaugh killed his family to gain sympathy as a way to distract attention away from his alleged financial crimes that were about to be exposed, all in separate cases. Give you an idea, he's facing over 90 separate charges related to alleged money laundering, stealing from clients, hiring a hitman to kill him so that his son could receive insurance payouts. There's a lot. So you could say that him acting this way and crying or being upset is all part of that scheme. The alternative theory is that maybe he really did discover his family murdered and he's emotional and he legitimately believes someone was upset with Paul over Mallory Beach and did this. And I'll tell you, he's also quite vocal, right? I mean, he's constantly speaking with authorities, cooperative. He was the one who called 911, apparently consented to the police investigation and these searches. So the question is, if someone committed this crime, would they do that? Would they be this cooperative, this open? That'll be up for a jury to decide. And that's all we have for you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidebar. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.